All right, hopefully the audio is going to work here. We're going to dive into Beowulf, and we are using the Burton Raffel translation. There are other translations out there, but this is the one recommended for class. I strongly encourage that this is the one that you're following along with. So, do you know anything about Beowulf? Do you know what the story is about? It's a great epic poem. And if you remember, we've encountered the Odyssey, so epic, right? This long story that has certain characteristics. You've got a hero, you've got somebody on a journey, a quest of some kind. And you're going to see that in Beowulf. And as we unfold the story, unpack the story, I will point some of those things out to you. We'll talk about them in class. Let me give you a little bit of background, a little bit of mental furniture before you dive in. Just kind of put things in your brain that will help you know how to navigate the story, okay? First of all, it is written in Old English. Now, our translation is a translation in modern English. We will be able to understand it just fine. But it was originally written in Old English. This is an Anglo-Saxon poem. It is very old. It is a treasure that we even have it. There are only something like 30,000 lines of Anglo-Saxon poetry that we have today, that have remained, that have lasted. And so Beowulf is part of that collection, and we're just very thankful to have it. It's a beautiful poem. Who wrote it? Don't know. When did they write it? Don't really know. Probably 5th century, and it is commonly accepted, generally accepted, that a Christian writer, a Christian Englishman, copied this down. And this was a story that was in the oral tradition, and that it was written down by probably a monk, is what is traditionally understood. You will see Christian elements in this story, and we can talk about those. Tolkien says that the best part of Beowulf are the 3 great battles. Those are the 3 major points of interest, if you will. And so you could kind of look at this story as there's a part A and a part B. I made cookies. Look at that. It's just a busy day. Made some Christmas cookies today. Sorry. Got some green frosting on my wrist there, I just noticed. There's a part A story and a part B story. So the part B stories are the 3 fights, battles, and those are awesome. Those are great. We're going to enjoy reading those. The part A stories, it's kind of the in-between stuff. And we'll start off getting to know a little bit about who the characters are. And there's really 3 groups of people. There's the Danes, and that's who we'll start with. And then the Gates, and then the Swedes. One thing that I should help you understand about your book, in the back is a lovely glossary of the characters. And you might get lost a little bit, and that's okay. Allow yourself to get lost. Pause the video, look it up. Like if you say, what is Herod? You'll turn to H, and you'll find out that it is the hall that King Hrothgar built. All right, so at any point you can pause and look things up. We're going to start on page 3, which is the prologue. And I go ahead and write in my book. I especially, you probably can't see it. I had to write for myself. Who's who here? Because it starts way, way, way back. With an early king, there's an ancestry that's going to be shared in the prologue. So it's okay to write in your book, to pause, take time, to kind of figure some things out. In the prologue, it's going to start with this royal legacy. We're going to find out about these wonderful, heroic kings and the deeds that they've done, the accomplishments that they've had, kind of setting the stage. So read along with me on page 3. Hear me. We've heard of Danish heroes, ancient kings, and the glory they cut for themselves, swinging mighty swords. How Scyld made slaves of soldiers from every land. Crowds of captives he'd beaten into terror. He traveled to Denmark alone, an abandoned child, but changed his own fate. Lived to be rich and much honored. He ruled lands on all sides. Wherever the sea would take them, his soldiers sailed, returned with tribute and obedience. There was a brave king, and he gave them more than his glory, conceived a son for the Danes, a new leader, allowed them by the grace of God. They had lived before his coming, kingless and miserable. Now the Lord of all life, ruler of glory, blessed them with a prince, Beowulf, not Beowulf, Beowulf, whose power and fame soon spread through the world. Skild's strong son was the glory of Denmark. His father's warriors were wound round his heart with golden rings, bound to their prince by his father's treasure. So young men build the future, wisely, open-handed in peace, protected in war. So warriors earn their fame, and wealth is shaped with a sword. When his time was come, the old king died. Still strong, but called to the Lord's hands. His comrades carried him down to the shore, bore him as their leader had asked, their lord and companion, while words could move on his tongue. Skild's reign had been long. He'd ruled them well. There in the harbor was a ring-proud fighting ship, its timbers icy, waiting, and there they brought the beloved body of their ring-giving lord and laid him near the mast. Next to that noble corpse, they heaped up treasures, jeweled helmets, hooked swords, of coats of mail, armor carried from the ends of the earth. No ship had ever sailed so brightly fitted. No king sent forth more deeply mourned. Forced to set him adrift, floating as far as the tide might run. They refused to give him less from their hoards of gold than those who'd shipped him away, an orphan and a beggar, to cross the waves alone. High up over his head they flew, his shining banner, then sadly let the water pull at the ship, watched it slowly sliding to where neither rulers, nor heroes, nor anyone can say, whose hands opened to take that motionless cargo. Now let's read chapter 1, and you're going to find out that there is a son named Hrothgar, who is a very good leader. He's going to build a hall, a mighty hall, and you're going to be introduced to a character named Grendel. Then Beowulf was king in that Danish castle, Skild's son, ruling as long as his father and as loved, a famous lord of men, and he in turn gave his people a son, the great Healfdene, a fierce fighter who led the Danes to the end of his long life and left them 4 children. These 3 princes to guide them in battle, Hergar and Hrothgar and Helga the Good, and 1 daughter, Urs, who was given to Onela, king of the Swedes, and became his wife and their queen. Then Hrothgar, taking the throne, led the Danes to such glory that comrades and kinsmen swore by his sword, and young men swelled his armies, and he thought of greatness, and he resolved to build a hall that would hold his mighty band and reach higher toward heaven than anything that had ever been known to the sons of men. And in that hall, he'd divide the spoils of their victories to old and young, what they'd earned in battle, leaving the common pastures untouched and taking no lives. The work was ordered, the timbers tied and shaped by the hosts that Hrothgar ruled. It was quickly ready, that most beautiful of dwellings, built as he'd wanted, and then he whose word was obeyed all over the earth named it Herit. His boast come true, he commanded a banquet, opened out his treasure-full hands. That towering place, gabled and huge, stood waiting for time to pass, for war to begin, for flames to leap as high as the feud that would light them. and for Herod to burn. A powerful monster, living down in the darkness, growled in pain. Impatient as day after day, the music rang loud in that hall, the harp's rejoicing call and the poet's clear songs sung of the ancient beginnings of us all. Listen to the song. It's a creation song. Recalling the Almighty, making the earth, shaping these beautiful plains marked off by oceans. Then proudly setting the sun and moon to glow across the land and light it. The corners of the earth were made lovely with trees and leaves made quick with life with each of the nations who now move on its face. And then, as now warriors sang of their pleasure, so Hrothgar's men lived happily in his hall, till the monster stirred. That demon, that fiend, Grendel, who haunted the moors, the wild marshes, and made his home in a hell, not hell, but earth. He was spawned in that slime, conceived by a pair of monsters, born of Cain, murderous creatures, banished by God, punished forever for the crime of Abel's death. The Almighty drove those demons out, and their exile was bitter. Shut away from men, they split into 1,000 forms of evil, spirits and fiends, goblins, monsters, giants, a brood forever opposing the Lord's will, and again defeated. Now let's move to chapter 2. We're going to meet this monster, Grendel. Did you catch where Grendel came from? Part of the exiled. Came from Cain's tribe. Punished forever. Exiled. All right, so Grendel in chapter 2, if you're with me on page 8, is going to attack. And the people that we're talking about are the Danes. All right, chapter 2. Then, when darkness had dropped, Grendel went up to Herod, wondering what the warriors would do in that hall when their drinking was done. He found them sprawled in sleep, suspecting nothing, their dreams undisturbed. The monster's thoughts were as quick as his greed or his claws. He slipped in through the door, and there in the silence snatched up 30 men, smashed them unknowing in their beds, and ran out with their bodies, the blood dripping behind them, back to his lair, delighted with his night's slaughter. At daybreak, with the sun's first light, they saw how well he had worked, and in that gray morning broke their long feast with tears and laments for the dead. Hrothgar, their lord, sat joyless in Herod, a mighty prince mourning the fate of his lost friends and companions. Knowing by its tracks that some demon had torn his followers apart, he wept, fearing the beginning might not be the end. And that night Grendel came again, so set on murder that no crime could ever be enough. No savage assault quenched his lust for evil. Then each warrior tried to escape him, searched for rest in different beds as far from Herod as they could find, seeing how Grendel hunted when they slept. Distance was safety. The only survivors were those who fled him. Hate had triumphed. So Grendel ruled, fought with the righteous, won against many, and won. So Herod stood empty and stayed deserted for years. 12 winters of grief for Hrothgar, king of the Danes. Sorrow heaped at his door by hell-forged hands. His misery leapt the seas. It was told and sung in all men's ears how Grendel's hatred began, how the monster relished his savage war on the Danes. keeping the bloody feud alive, seeking no peace, offering no truce, accepting no settlement, no price in gold or land, and paying living for one crime only with another. No one waited for reparation from his plundering claws. That shadow of death hunted in the darkness, stalked Hrothgar's warriors, old and young, lying and waiting, hidden in mist, invisibly following them from the edge of the marsh, always there, unseen. So mankind's enemy continued his crimes, killing as often as he could, coming alone, bloodthirsty and horrible. Though he lived in Heorot, when the night hid him, he never dared touch King Hrothgar's glorious throne protected by God, God whose love Grendel could not know. But Hrothgar's heart was bent. The best and most noble of his council debated remedies. They sat in secret sessions, talking of terror and wondering what the bravest of warriors could do. And sometimes they sacrificed to the old stone gods. They made heathen vows, hoping for hell's support, the devil's guidance in driving their affliction off. That was their way and the heathens' only hope. Hell always in their hearts, knowing neither God nor his passing as he walks through our world, the Lord of heaven and earth. Their ears could not hear his praise nor know his glory. Let them beware. I lost my place. Let them beware those who are thrust into danger, clutched at by trouble, yet can carry no solace in their hearts, cannot hope to be better. Hail to those who will rise to God and drop off their dead bodies and seek our Father's peace. Right, so the writer kind of jumps in a little bit here at the end. Beware. If you don't know God, it kind of gives a little lesson here at the end of chapter 2. All right, so what are the Danes to do? They are being plagued by Grendel, this monster who for 12 years has attacked and attacked and attacked and taken Hrothgar's men. And the council is sitting around trying to figure out, what do we do? How do we get rid of this problem? And word spreads all throughout to other lands about what is happening to the Danes with this monster, Grendel. Well, who hears about it but Beowulf? Beowulf is not a Dane. He comes from the Gates. And we'll start at page 11 with 3. And this is very short. And then we'll kind of end this video. And you'll probably have a little bit of reading to do on your own. And then when you come back to class, we'll talk about it. All right? So, part 3. So the living sorrow of Healfdane's son simmered, bitter and fresh, and no wisdom or strength could break it. That agony hung on king and people alike, harsh and unending, violent and cruel and evil. In his far-off home, Beowulf, Hygelac's follower and the strongest of the Gates, greater and stronger than anyone anywhere in this world, heard how Grendel filled knights with horror, and he quickly commanded a boat fitted out, proclaiming that he would go to that famous king. He would sail across the sea to Hrothgar now when help was needed. None of the wise ones regretted his going, much as he was loved by the Gates. The omens were good, and they urged the adventure on. So Beowulf chose the mightiest men he could find. Does this sound a little bit familiar to the last epic story that we read? The bravest and the best of the Gates, 14 in all, and he led them down to their boat. He knew the sea would point the prow straight to that distant Danish shore. Then they sailed, set their ship out on the waves under the cliffs. Ready for what came, they wound through the currents, the seas beating at the sand, and were borne in the lap of their shining ship, lined with gleaming armor, going safely in that oak-hard boat to where their hearts took them. The wind hurried them over the waves. The ship foamed through the sea like a bird, until in the time they had known it would take, standing in the round curled prow, they could see sparkling hills, high and green, jutting up over the shore, and rejoicing in those rock-steep cliffs, they quietly ended their voyage. Jumping to the ground, the Gates pushed their boat to the sand and tied it in place, mail shirts and armor rattling as they swiftly moored their ship. And then they gave thanks to God for their easy crossing. High on a wall, a Danish Watchers, one of the Danes, is kind of on the lookout and sees them. Patrolling along the cliffs, saw the travelers crossing to the shore, their shields raised and shining, and he came riding down, Hrothgar's lieutenant, spurring his horse, needing to know why they'd landed, these men in armor. Shaking his heavy spur in their faces, he spoke. "Whose soldiers are you? You who've been carried in your deep-keeled ship across the sea road to this country of mine? Listen, I've stood on these cliffs longer than you know, keeping our coast free of pirates, raiders, sneaking ashore from their ships, seeking our lives and our gold. None have ever come more openly. And you've offered no password, no sign from my prince, no permission from my people for your landing. Nor have I ever seen out of all the men on earth one greater than has come with you. No commoner carries such weapons unless his appearance and his beauty are both lies. You, tell me your name and your father's. No spies go further into Danish soil than you've come already. Strangers from wherever it was you sailed, tell me, and tell it quickly. The quicker the better, I say, for all of us. Speak, say exactly who you are and from where and why." So the Watcher wants to know, who are you? Why are you here? Why have you come? I've been standing guard and I've made sure no pirates have come by. No marauders invading our land. Wow, this guy who's with you, wow, he's big, he's great. That's what he says. All right, so in part 4, we are going to hear Beowulf's response, and we're going to find out, can Beowulf help them with their problem against Grendel? We'll see. I hope you enjoyed this story, and we will talk about it more in class.